Welcome to Take It from the Ironwoman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Ironwoman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Ironwoman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Ironwoman. We only have special guests, and today I'm very honored to say the least. Malissa Smith is an author, women boxing historian, and public speaker. Her latest book that just came out in June is The Promise of Women's Boxing, a momentous new era for the sweet science. Malissa, maybe give us a little bit of your background.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to talk about women's boxing and my new book, The Promise of Women's Boxing. In terms of my background, I started loving the sport as a small kid, growing up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Then over the years, was very influenced by fighters such as Muhammad Ali, who was such a public figure, not only in the United States, but around the world. So boxing really had a place in the culture of the United States. It wasn't until many, many decades later in my 40s that I actually entered a boxing gym myself and was very lucky to live in the neighborhood of Gleason's gym, which is probably one of the most storied gyms in the United States, if not the world, as a place where champions have learned their craft. Being there, I also began to notice that there were many women who were starting to train, some of whom were professional boxers. And out of that experience, it piqued my academic interests. So I went back to school, got a master's degree in liberal studies, and did my thesis on the question of gender binary and women's boxing. Where does it live? It's a hyper-masculine sport, but women are practicing it. Is it accepted? By posing that question, I went on to write a history of the sport called The History of Women's Boxing. The first and unfortunately the only book that really looks at the total history of women's performance as boxers and in the other roles that they had in the sport, and also even history of things like being an audience member. Because believe it or not, at one time, women were not even allowed to go in to see a boxing match. They would dress up and cross-dress as men to watch a boxing match. This is in the 1890s. How crazy is that? It's just about a labor of love to tell their stories.
We need to hear more of that. We see it on TV or maybe on billboards, and that's about it. And before we met, I sent you a message that I actually went to the gym and I took some boxing classes. And I have to say, I loved it. As a runner, obviously, the upper body is not very well defined. So the boxing has really helped me. One of the coaches said to me, don't kiss the bag, hit the bag. That's a very good message. It can be translated into the real world. Like women sometimes are too nice to use that word. We need to hit a little harder. Let's dig a little deeper into the history. And I'm just appalled that women had to dress as men to go and see a boxing match.
But what's interesting is after the turn of the century, there were promoters who boxing was always on the edge as an acceptable sport or not an acceptable sport. It's been illegal more often than it's not been legal. And people would follow the game. And there have been promoters who thought, well, if we make it acceptable to the carriage trade, to women to accompany their husbands to watch the sport, maybe we will elevate the sport itself. So by the teens and the 1920s, women were being encouraged to come to boxing matches because it made it legitimate. You see that in popular culture. There are images from like the 1930s in the United States. You'll see the actress Mae West, who loved the fights, and you see her at ringside in California along with people like Marlene Dietrich, who, by the way, learned to box in Germany in the 1920s when she lived in Berlin, because it had some popularity there then. It's a very interesting relationship of women to boxing, both as practitioners, but also as promoters, as managers, as somebody who stands in the middle of the ring and announces the fight, referees, judges. And it's been difficult for women to cross that barrier, and continues to be a struggle for women to have equity in the sport.
Where do you come in? So you're the referee of opening up the world to more women.
I guess so. I really think of myself as a storyteller. I'm here to tell the story of women who have had the temerity to pick up the gloves and cross what we call the velvet ropes into the ring. It is not for the faint of heart. Boxing does not play, as we say. You can be hurt. You can lose your life. There's many, many tragedies that can accompany the realm and the world of boxing. It's important that the reading public understand just how much women put into learning the sport and dedicating their lives to being able to perform it, whether as amateurs or as professionals. And then we've had some wonderful strides. Women began to compete in the Olympics in 2012 at the London Games. Parenthetically, it was the last sport to have both men and women compete. And even more parenthetically, they originally, in 1908, if you can believe it, in St. Louis at the St. Louis exhibition, there were also Olympic Games, and women performed a boxing match as an exhibition. Men also performed exhibition boxing matches. They had more than one match. They had several matches. And the decision was taken by the Olympic Committee at the time to keep men boxing, and it became a sport, an official sport of the Olympics in 1912. But it took women another 108 years. So I'm sorry, it was 1904. They were in 1908, and women didn't compete until 2012. What can you say? It's an issue, but the brilliance of the women's performance in 2012 is where I kind of start my new book, The Promise of Women's Boxing, where I really dig into the tremendous changes that have happened over the last decade or so, with more women entering the field, more women with better skills, some super fights where women have actually cracked the $1 million barrier for a payday, which is quite remarkable that it only happened a couple of times, actually with a German fighter named Regina Hamich in the 20-aughts. But it really has been an exciting time. But at the same time, there are promoters who still refuse to put women on their fight cards. There's inconsistency in the way women are able to obtain fights. There's a real huge disparity in pay equity between male fighters and female fighters, and even their support for during their training period or when they have camp prior to a big fight. So there's still many more barriers to press for. And for me in particular, it's really to just broadcast the news, if you will, that women do box and that they're wonderful at what they do. And they bring excitement to a sport that has seen its own popularity erode over the years, especially in the United States, where other combat sports, such as mixed martial arts, have taken more of a center stage.
It feels like I'm learning so much about the history and Marlene Dietrich boxing that we're like, wow, I can only speak for myself. Why don't we hear more of this? It's just amazingly sad, I have to say. And when you say the London Olympics in 2012, where did the women come from? All the countries around the world?
There were many. There were 36 women in those first games. Mm-hmm. In each, there were 12 women in each weight class. 3 weight classes, 12 women. Mm-hmm. They came from all over the world. There were fighters from China, from South America, from the United States had a team of 3 fighters, and we medaled in 2. And most amazingly, Clarissa Shields, who was only 17 at the time, won the gold medal as a middleweight, and then went back in 2016 and won her second gold medal, the only American boxer, male or female, to have ever won back 2 gold medals in the Olympics. So she has absolutely solidified herself in history as an Olympian, but as a professional boxer, she has gone on to amazing achievements as a 3-time undisputed champion, and is continuing to really push as a trailblazer to create a landscape for women in the sport where it will be more acceptable and where strength and the attributes of a strong athlete are more acceptable.
And I'm sure we can transfer that into the business world. As I said, don't kiss the back, but hit the back. We as women have to stand up more and fight for our rights and equal pay. You see that in many sports. And I also, at one point, saw a statistic that in the most sports, we only see 40% of women on TV in sports, and the rest is all men. So how can we promote that much more, that we need to be seen?
You're absolutely right. One of the challenges now is there are promoters who still refuse to place women on their cards, or if women are on a boxing card, they are on the untelevised portion of that card. To your point, women are invisible in something that is really important. And to your other point, which is don't kiss the bat, hit it, that really is a huge lesson, because women so often pull their punches in this, if you want to carry that metaphor through, in their work lives, in their family lives. The lesson that I've learned coming to boxing in my 40s, I realized I didn't want to compete. That wasn't my interest, because I was so busy competing with myself, so busy unlearning all of the behaviors that I had had of not expressing myself, of not owning my own power, owning my own sense that it was okay for me to show who I was and to be strong and powerful in my work and in my family life, in every aspect of my life. And in essence, boxing is what gave me writing and the ability to write books, was understanding that I had nothing to be afraid of, that I was all in my own head, that projecting one's own power is probably the most significant thing that one can do. Undoing all of the decades, especially women my age. I've turned 70, and I want people to understand that even at 70, you keep learning, you keep growing, you publish books, you show your power.
And for the listeners, she does not look any day 70-year-old lady. She's a lot of power, a lot of smiles and happiness, that I get that energy that we just need to do something and we need to stand up, and we're ready. So you got into the sports, but what did you do when you weren't writing or boxing? What was your day job?
Oh, well, I'm a mom. I got married late. I had a child late. So I was in my 40s. That all kind of happened. I was 45 when my daughter was born. And for my day job, I've had many. I'm a construction manager. I've been an IT executive, but I ended my career working for the city of New York as an agency chief contracting officer for the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. Basically, I took all the things I ever did in my world and became a procurement expert and helped usher in opportunities for, especially for minority and women-owned business enterprises, to perform services for city agencies. And my agency in particular is responsible, among other things, for ensuring that every renter in New York City is living in an apartment that is meeting all the requirements of the rules. So if a person doesn't have heat and the landlord won't give it to them, they would come to our agency to fix their heat. My responsibility was to make sure that we had the appropriate contractors in place to perform those tasks. One of my particular areas was to ensure that our contract processes were equitable and fair and met not only the requirements of the various laws that are rule over any kind of government procurement, but more to the point that we were above those requirements, because as with most things, women, minorities are underserved in terms of a lot of opportunities. I really felt it was my mission to ensure that those goals were also met.
Seems like you have this mission and vision in life that you're fighting, to use that word, for in boxing, but also to fight for the rights for the tenants, to get heat. I know how important that is in New York. I lived through some times when there was no heat, no hot water, and it's not the most comfortable time in your life. But that's the New York experience that you also need to live through. The fight goes on. It's not that it ends. We need more of you, as I said at the beginning. If you had a magic wand, what would you like to change tomorrow?
I would like people to really recognize who they all are. The cleavage in American society is very troubling. I've grown up and lived through a lot. I lived through the Vietnam War. I lived through Watergate. I lived through Muhammad Ali as a figure. I've lived through Black power and the loss of power. I'm very blessed. I'm lucky in terms of what I've been able to achieve and the life that I've been able to live. But the cleavage now is so painful and so angry. And I would really like for us to almost emulate the South African truth and reconciliation construct of sitting down and everyone owning what they feel as a way towards healing, because we have a lot of trouble right now. And the anger towards the sectionalism, the anger towards groups from one side or another is really untenable. And I fear for what will happen. I fear for the future. And I have never really felt that way about America before. I've lived through a lot. I lived through civil rights. That's been the tenor of my life, living in interesting times. Where we are now is very frightening. I would like us to heal that and to find our way to express our power, but with respect and with the understanding of what the other is about.
Very wise words of wisdom. Thank you so much. And for the fighting you do for everybody. And also these times are not easy, but if we have a positive mindset and we fight for maybe the people who are not as fortunate as we are, then hopefully we can create a better world for everybody. These are the words, big words. But if everybody takes one step and shows up, it's what we want these days.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Thank you.
Okay. Good luck with your book launch. And we want to hear more about the history of boxing. It's very intriguing to me. And I feel like I don't know anything. So History of Boxing is the book. And also the book that came out in June is worthwhile reading. So thank you so much, Malissa, for giving us insights into a sport that needs to be empowered, and also women need to be empowered. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Keep hitting, keep hitting. What are you taking away from this conversation? I learned so much about the history of boxing. Take it from the Ironwoman. We have episodes every Monday. Check it out. Come with us. Learn from others. Learn about something different that we don't know yet. And Take It from the Ironwoman is also the book Global Business Coaching with Sports Parallels. Download it or get it in your local bookstore. Support local female-owned businesses. See you next time. Thank you.